All right, so get ready, because today we are diving into a story that will totally grab you right from the first page.
Oh, yeah.
Imagine this. Okay, your 10-year-old daughter brutally attacked.
Oh, my gosh.
And then imagine the perpetrators are about to walk free.
Wow.
What would you do?
I can't even imagine.
That's the question at the heart of John Grisham,
Oh, yeah.
A Time to Kill.
Great book.
It's a story that just throws us right into the racial tensions of Clayton, Mississippi, back in 1989.
Okay.
And it takes us on this wild ride through the legal system
Oh, yeah.
and the human heart.
It really does.
Really makes you think.
It does.
So where does this story begin?
Well, it all starts with a horrific crime.
Okay.
The kind that just sends shockwaves through a small town.
Yeah.
10-year-old Tanya Haley, an African-American girl, is walking home from the grocery store when two white men grab her, drag her into the woods, and brutally rape and beat her.
It's the kind of crime that makes you question humanity.
Absolutely. And Grisham doesn't shy away from the brutality of it.
No.
He describes the attack in graphic detail, forcing you to confront the reality of Tanya's suffering.
It's tough.
It is.
So they catch these guys, right?
Yes. Thankfully, they're arrested pretty quickly.
Yeah.
Mainly because they're so arrogant and stupid.
Oh, really?
They actually brag about the attack at a local bar.
Oh, no.
And someone overhears them and reports it to the sheriff.
Okay.
Sheriff Ozzie Walls, by the way, is the first black sheriff in Ford County.
Oh, wow.
Which adds another layer of complexity to the story.
I bet.
Yeah.
So the bad guys are behind bars? Seems like justice is about to be served.
Right.
But knowing Grisham,
yeah,
there's a twist coming.
There is. And it comes in the form of Tanya's father, Carl Lee Hailey.
Okay.
Carl Lee's a hardworking, church-going man, deeply devoted to his family.
Yeah.
And when he sees his little girl broken and traumatized, something snaps inside him.
Yeah, I can imagine.
He knows that in Mississippi, in 1989, two white men who raped a black girl might not face real justice.
So he decides to take matters into his own hands.
Exactly. He gets hold of an M16 rifle.
Wow.
The same kind he used in Vietnam.
Okay.
And he starts planning.
Oh, boy.
He knows the courthouse layout. He knows when the prisoners will be transported.
Yeah.
And he's determined to make sure those men pay for what they did.
This is where things get really intense.
Yeah.
So walk us through that fateful day at the courthouse.
Okay, picture this. The courthouse is packed. Everyone knows this case is a powder keg, and the tension is palpable.
Right.
The two rapists are being led from their cell to the courtroom, surrounded by guards.
Okay.
Suddenly, Carl Lee bursts out of a janitor's closet,
What?
armed with his rifle.
I can only imagine the chaos.
It's absolute pandemonium. People are screaming, diving for cover.
Oh, my gosh.
Carl Lee manages to shoot both Cobb and Willard, killing them instantly.
Wow.
He also wounds a deputy in the process. Oh, no.
Then as quickly as it began, it's over.
Wow.
Carl Lee drops his weapon and waits to be arrested.
What a scene. So what happens next? This is where our main character, Jake Brigance, enters the picture, right?
Right. Jake's a young, ambitious lawyer.
Okay.
Maybe a little naive, but with a strong sense of justice.
Yeah.
He sees Carl Lee's case as his chance to make a name for himself, but he quickly realizes he's bitten off more than he can chew.
I bet defending a man who just committed a double murder in cold blood in a town already simmering with racial tension, that's got to be a challenge.
Huge challenge.
What are some of the obstacles Jake faces right off the bat?
First, there's the sheer outrage from the white community.
Yeah.
They see Carl Lee as a cold-blooded killer who deserves the death penalty.
Right.
Then there's the fear. Anyone who even thinks about helping Carl Lee is immediately labeled a traitor and faces threats, intimidation, you name it. And then there's the Ku Klux Klan.
Oh, wow.
They see this case as an opportunity to, like, flex their muscles.
To remind everyone who's really in charge.
Yeah.
They start making threats, you know, burning crosses and just generally making life hell for anyone associated with Carl Lee's defense.
So Jake's facing death threats, racial prejudice, and the KKK.
Yeah.
Sounds like a pretty hostile environment for a trial.
It is, and it gets even worse.
Really?
Jake's house is burned down, his family's forced into hiding, and his legal aide, Ellen Rourke, is abducted and brutally beaten by the Klan.
It's hard to believe that kind of violence could happen, you know, in the pursuit of justice.
It's terrible.
It makes you wonder if the races were reversed.
Yeah.
Would there be the same outrage and intimidation?
That's a question Grisham definitely wants you to consider.
Yeah.
He forces you to look at the case through multiple lenses and confront the uncomfortable realities of racial bias in the legal system. But despite all this, Jake refuses to back down.
Good for him.
He's determined to give Carl Lee a fair trial, even if it means putting his own life on the line.
So how does he even begin to build a defense for Carl Lee?
Right.
What legal strategy does he use?
He decides to go with the insanity plea.
Oh, wow.
He argues that Carl Lee was temporarily insane at the time of the shooting, driven to that point by the trauma of his daughter's assault and the fear that justice wouldn't be served.
The insanity plea, it's always controversial.
Very.
Is it ever really possible to understand what someone else is going through, to know what would push them to that point?
That's the crux of the issue, isn't it?
Yeah.
Grisham doesn't give you easy answers.
Right.
He presents the complexities of the human psyche, the gray areas of morality, and forces you to grapple with the question of whether Carl Lee's actions were justified, even if they were born out of a profound and understandable grief and rage.
So how does the trial play out?
It's a tense, dramatic courtroom battle.
Okay.
The prosecution paints Carl Lee as a cold-blooded killer, a vigilante who took the law into his own hands. They bring up his military background, his proficiency with firearms, and argue that the murders were premeditated and calculated.
And what about Jake's side?
Jake focuses on the emotional aspect.
Okay.
He tries to humanize Carl Lee to make the jury understand the depth of his pain and the desperation that led him to take such drastic action.
Right.
He calls witnesses to testify about Carl Lee's character, his love for his daughter, and the impact of her attack on him.
He's appealing to their empathy.
Exactly. He wants the jury to step into Carl Lee's shoes, to feel what he felt, to understand that his actions, while undeniably wrong, were born out of a love so profound that it transcended reason.
Did it work?
It was a risky strategy, but it ultimately proved effective.
Oh, right.
The jury was clearly torn.
Yeah.
They deliberated for days, wrestling with the evidence, the law, and their own moral compass.
The tension must have been unbearable waiting for that verdict.
It was. The entire town was on edge. The threat of violence loomed over everything, and then finally the jury reached a decision.
What was the verdict?
Not guilty.
Wow. That's a shocker.
It was a stunning victory for Jake and a moment of intense relief for Carl Lee and his family.
Yeah.
But it also sent shockwaves through Clayton.
Right.
The white community was outraged.
Of course.
They saw it as a travesty of justice, a sign that the system had failed them.
And the black community.
They saw it as a victory not just for Carl Lee, but for all those who had been marginalized and denied justice because of the color of their skin.
Yeah.
They saw it as a sign that the system for once had worked in their favor.
But does a not guilty verdict necessarily equal justice?
That's a good question.
It sounds like this case left a lot of people feeling conflicted, regardless of the outcome.
Absolutely. It's a complex issue. Grisham doesn't offer any easy answers. He leaves you to grapple with the questions he raises, to confront your own beliefs about justice, race, and the limits of the law.
Yeah.
And that's what makes A Time to Kill such a powerful and thought-provoking read.
Right.
It stays with you long after you finish the last page.
It sounds like this book really dives deep into the complexities of human nature and the legal system.
Yeah.
Is there anything else you think our listeners should know about A Time to Kill before we wrap things up?
Yeah, it really does.
It really makes you think about, what justice really means.
It does.
And one of the things Grisham does so well is to show how deeply intertwined justice and race are in the American South.
Yeah, absolutely.
It makes you question if a black man in Mississippi in 1989 could ever truly get a fair trial.
Right, especially when you consider the KKK's presence throughout the trial.
Yeah.
It's a constant reminder of the threat of violence and the power dynamics at play.
Absolutely. The KKK isn't just a background element in the story.
Right.
They represent the systemic racism that permeates every aspect of life in Clinton. They're a constant reminder that even if the legal system finds Carl Lee not guilty, there's another kind of judgment waiting for him outside the courtroom.
Exactly.
So what happens to Carl Lee after the verdict? Does he just go back to his life?
Well, his life is irrevocably changed.
Right.
He may be legally free, but the emotional and psychological scars of the ordeal run deep.
Yeah.
He's lost his home, his sense of security, and the trial has divided his community.
And what about Jake? He wins this huge case, but at a significant personal cost.
Yeah, right? He's faced death threats, his home has been burned down, and his family has been forced into hiding.
Yeah.
It makes you wonder, what is the true price of justice?
Yeah.
Is it something you can measure in legal fees and court victories, or is there a deeper, more personal cost?
Yeah, it sounds like Grisham is saying there are no easy answers when it comes to justice.
Nope.
That sometimes, even when the right verdict is reached, there are still casualties along the way.
Absolutely.
It's a tough one.
And that's what makes A Time to Kill so compelling. It doesn't shy away from the complexities of the issue. It forces you to confront the uncomfortable realities of racial bias, the flaws in the legal system, and the human cost of seeking justice in a society that's still struggling to come to terms with its own past.
So for our listeners now adding A Time to Kill to their reading list,
yeah,
what's the one thing we want them to keep in mind as they dive into this story?
I'd say pay attention to the details.
Yeah.
The way Grisham describes Clayton, the characters, he creates the dialogue he uses, it all paints a vivid picture of the South in the late 20th century. And be prepared to ask yourself some tough questions.
Yeah.
What would you do if you were in Carl Lee's shoes, in Jake's house? There are no easy answers, but that's what makes this book so thought-provoking and ultimately so rewarding.
A Time to Kill, a story about justice, race, and the human heart. It's a deep dive into the complexities of the legal system and a reminder that sometimes the pursuit of justice comes at a heavy price. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive, and we'll see you next time for another insightful exploration.